It is well documented that the biblical Israelites were a black-skinned people. And it is well documented that they married among themselves and remained black-skinned wherever they went all throughout history. It is well documented that many of them lived in the west coast of Africa. It is also well documented that some of these same Israelites from West Africa were transported in cargo slave ships to the Americas via what is famously known as the transatlantic slave trade.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you again so much for tuning in. This is the Realdealfam Network. I am Andre, and this is my beautiful wife, Essie.
Hello. Ooh, boo. I'm the boss.
Special delivery.
Special edition.
Thank y'all again so much for your support. And if you hadn't had an opportunity as of yet, could you please hit that subscribe button? That would be highly appreciated. And also hit that notification bell as well as the thumbs up.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Especially if you want to be alerted to what's going on.
Yes, get them fresh. With that being said, let's dive in. Tonight we got a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. It's about my wife and her family's genealogy.
Hearts. Yeah, so we were going to get into some of this stuff, you know, like the reunion this year and then next year, you know, because things is kind of getting slim, and we need to know these things before our elders, you know, move on to the next place and be with the Lord. You got to know about your family history. So, late camp meeting in the Promised Land, we need to have a camp meeting, okay? And so, we're stuck in the house with the coronavirus, and no telling if we'll be able to have meet together or what, you know, what's up. So, we're going to share some information that we found about the family reunion, the family history.
Yeah, like she said, I think the first time that I was aware that she was going to do a deep dive into her genealogy is when they hosted a family reunion here in town, her and her mother, and they put together a book that was very interesting.
Oh, yes. And we'll be working out of that book, the family book that you got last time. So if you came to the one that we did here in town, the Williams family, we gave out a book, The Family Genealogy. A lot of people, ordered it and different things. So we can't give you any more books right now because we're on coronavirus lockdown. So, but if you know a relative who has one and stuff, y'all get together and go over the videos because it's got some good, interesting things already in there. But, I'm just going to go over a few basic things that are in there, pretty much give a basic foundation, but then we're going to go on from there, from where we left off last time, which is super interesting.
Yes, the book is very comprehensive. It gives you an idea of it goes back really far, gives you in deep detail information about her grandparents, about their siblings, about where they're from, some of their travels throughout their life, their kids, their siblings. All of that is all in the book. So it's really good. I was really impressed, and like she said, we distributed at the family reunion. It was a hit, and everybody wanted a copy.
Yeah, everybody wants to know about their people. I think last time we started off, we did all of the grandparents and so on and so forth from Emias and Essie, their parents, and all the way up to their grandparents. I think I got back all the way to 1840 last time with Plato Williams. So this time I was able to, based on the stories and things that we collected, we went all across the country collecting information and photos from everybody. And so based on that information, and a family member gave a DNA test, we were able to, get some more good juicy details. So that's what we'll be talking about this time.
And right now it's like a time where everybody's seeking knowledge and trying to find out history and learn about themselves, about their family and where they're from and that type of thing. And so it was great. My wife put that book together, her and her mom. So y'all stay tuned. We're going to put together a little video we want for y'all to watch, and it's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, several part series. So if you want to be in the line, in the loop, click subscribe so you can be first to get the info, and go over and talk about it with your kids, and let everybody know that we're doing this and we're putting it out there so you are more aware of who you are, and what things are in your family line. And a lot of the same traits and different characteristics have been passed down to basically like thousands of years, just in your bloodline. It's in your blood.
Yeah, so it's recommended. Do your own genealogy, do your own research. It's highly recommended. It's great to know who your people were and where you come from.
Yeah.
It can only bless you.
Mm-hmm.
But stay tuned, and I think you're going to enjoy this.
Mm-hmm.
About 1525 to 1866, 12.5 million Africans were taken from their homeland and forcibly shipped across the Atlantic, a journey that almost 2 million of them wouldn't survive. By the turn of the 18th century, European merchants were building vessels capable of transporting hundreds of slaves per journey. These ships had extra portholes for ventilation, weapons mounted on deck in case of rebellion, and additional compartments added below deck to take on more human cargo. Before boarding the ships at African port cities, slaves were stripped of their clothing and remaining possessions and had their heads completely shaved. During boarding, which could take weeks or even months, slaves lived on the deck of the ship in a temporary wooden house constructed by the crew. The crew also installed netting around the deck of the ship, designed to catch slaves who might opt for death over forced servitude. Once moved below deck, slaves would find themselves stuffed into compartments with ceilings as low as 4.5 feet, where they would spend most of their voyage. They were segregated by gender and age. Adult men were kept separately and shackled in pairs. Women usually left unbound in their designated compartment, and children often free to move about the ship. There was no plumbing of any kind. Slaves were forced to relieve themselves where they sat, creating hellish conditions when combined with the heat and lack of ventilation below deck. Disease was rampant. Measles, smallpox, influenza, scurvy, and dysentery, the #1 killer, ravaged slaves and crew members alike. The slaves generally spent about 8 hours a day above deck, but were still separated by gender with a barricado, a reinforced wall that could be used to protect crew members in case of a revolt. Slaves were also subject to forced exercise, sometimes including dance and song for the entertainment of the crew. Disobedient slaves were tortured and beaten, usually whipped with the especially cruel cat-o'-nine-tails, a tool designed to inflict maximum pain.
Where it gets interesting is, in America, there was a slave trade. And a lot of the slaves, a very high percentage of them, came from Western Nigerian ports. And in America today, you see a very large movement of African Americans who say that they're the real chosen people, that they're the children of Israel, they're the Judeans. So what are they just trying to create an identity for themselves because they were slaves, or is there really something here? And the answer is, most likely there is something there.
Who are we? As African Americans, we have to ask ourselves these questions. Why is it that we don't learn about our history in school? We learn about everyone else's history: English, Irish, Romans, Greeks, the Crusades. The only thing we know is civil rights movement and Martin Luther King and all that he did for us to get us our liberties and human decency, civil rights. We do know about the life of Olaudah Equiano and his slave narrative, how he was captured and eventually freed himself. We do know that we came off the west coast of Africa, or so it was told, shipped all over across the world, crammed into boats with no space in between. We also know that during the transatlantic slave trade, more than 3 million Africans died during transport, but over the 400 years of slavery, more than 150 million slaves died in slavery. We know that Christopher Columbus came and transported slaves to the Caribbean. But what before that? We've heard rumors of Africans selling other Africans, but is this true? Why is it that we know more about the Romans and the Greeks, but we don't know anything about what happened to African Americans prior to slavery? What was our culture? What was our customs? Why is it that slavery is so foggy when most of American civilization and historians know everything about everyone else's culture? Well, for that, we're going to do some studying, and we're going to consult our Bible. We're going to go back through what's called our lineage in Genesis. Lineage is very important, okay? And we're going to use that by giving our family history and using an American story of the Williams family lineage, for example. In 2011, we decided to go ahead and do our family lineage. It had been done prior by our cousin Betty, but this time we wanted to take it back and use census records, interviews, as well as accounts that she had collected, combine them all together. And in doing so, we were able to come up with a book of our family lineage using census records, court records, Ancestry.com, as well as other websites that were helpful. We discovered many of our family members who may have been missing or the people that we were unaware of. We even reunited with other family members. Our earliest family member that we were able to legitimately connect with is Plato Williams. Plato Williams was born in 1840 and lived until 1914. In 1880, we find census records for Plato and Hester Williams. Together, they have 8 children: Fanny, Mary J., Flora, Sally, Emmaus, Julius, Madison, and Plato Jr. And it is through these 2 brothers, Emmaus and Julius, that we are able to trace our lineage. Emmaus Williams I was born in 1871 and died in 1924. This is one of the last surviving photos of him. He was married to Sarah Ann Williams. She was born in 1870. Together they had 13 children. Emmaus also marries again to Essie Mitchell Williams. She was born in 1880. Together they have 14 children: Blandina, Elizabeth, Emmaus, Lillian, Clifford, Estella, Matthew, Georgia May, Ernest, Townsend May, Susie Bell, Earlene Williams, as well as 2 stillborn children that we do not know their names. Emmaus' brother, Julius Williams, was born in 1875, and he was married to Mary Selena Jackson Williams. Together they had 19 children, however only 5 survived: Julius, John, Esther, Hester, and Mary Williams. Oral traditions are the practice of telling history through storytelling or griots, passing on history, culture, ancestors, religion, and traditions by the spoken word. In May of 2011, we interviewed Royal Johnson. He is the grandson of Julius Williams. Royal says that our family was sold 3 times in slavery, first to the Weeks in Georgia, then to the Wilkes in Alabama, and finally to the Williams in South Carolina. The 86-year-old goes back to the days of when his grandparents told him the stories. He recalls these memories as a child sitting in the common room, gathered with his sister Dovia and cousin Eartha, listening to his grandpa Julius Williams and grandma Hester. They were the grandchildren who grew up in the house of storytellers. They come from generations in which storytelling was not only important for passing down family history, it was also entertainment for children. At no other time in the household were children permitted to listen to the conversations of grown folks except at these moments. Royal starts off by closing his eyes and wetting his lips for a good long conversation. We come from South Carolina, drift off from Madagascar, Africa. Plato's father was from Africa. He was brought over from Madagascar. When Royo says we come adrift from Madagascar, I couldn't believe it. I thought all African Americans came from the west coast of Africa. Never could I imagine Madagascar, which is on the east coast. So here's Madagascar on the east coast of Africa, next to Mozambique, and above South Africa in the Indian Ocean. So the question is, how did slaves get from the east coast of Africa all the way to America? Well, not only during the slave trade was there slaves transported from west coast of Africa, but also from the eastern coast of Africa and all throughout the Middle East. Starting from the 1500s until the 1900s, it is said that we were sold and captured by the Arabs, who in return sold us to the Portuguese and other Europeans, and from there we were transported from all over Africa, not just the western coast, to the Americas, in which we now reside. And not only North America, but also overwhelmingly South America as well, especially in Brazil, and the Caribbean. And it is not all Africans who are captured and enslaved, but only specific groups. And we'll find out who those specific groups are later on in the video. In 1505, we do find that the Portuguese do invade East Africa. They also invade Madagascar, later to be taken over by the French. We find that hundreds of thousands of them were shipped out for slave cargo. Indeed, we do find this on many states' manifests and also their census records, showing that they did receive slaves from Madagascar. In Virginia, we see that they received only a little over 4% of their slaves were from Madagascar. So this makes our family history very interesting. Only a tiny or small percentage of the slaves that were transported to the Americas were from Madagascar. How are these people related to those on the west coast of Africa? Well, what about DNA? What does our DNA say? Well, to do DNA, we're going to go through Emias Williams' lineage, through his grandson, Nate. Recently, Nate took a DNA test, but the unusual circumstances is that his only black relative is his grandfather, Emias Williams. So that gives us a unique ability to go through the male lineage of our family and find out what DNA do we have. According to Ancestry.com, the DNA says that we are Southern Bantu peoples. Extending through the heart of Africa, our Cameroon, Congo, and Southern Bantu peoples region winds through tropical rainforest, humid savanna, and semi-arid desert. Starting about 3,000 years ago, Bantu-speaking peoples spread from an area around modern-day Cameroon and Nigeria through what is now sub-Saharan Africa in one of the greatest migrations of human history, if not one, the greatest. Okay, so what does this mean for us? How can we be both Western and Eastern Coast Africans? Well, let's start off by knowing what Bantu means. Bantu simply means language, or relating to or denoting to a group of Niger-Congo languages spoken in Central and Southern Africa, including Swahili, Xhosa, and Zulu. The Bantu or Abantu was used by colonists and is the Zulu word for people. It is a plural word of Umutu. Yes, the same Zulu, Shaka Zulu. Here's a picture of Shaka. He's from close near South Africa. So it's not just the western coast of Africa. These are Bantu peoples, a people who are speaking a specific type of language and not just on the west coast of Africa. So what does that mean for us? Okay, so let's take a look at a map of where Ancestry.com says these Bantu people are from the western coast of Africa. It says Nigeria, Cameroon, and Congo. Okay, they're right in the little curvature of Western Africa, which goes right along with where it says many of the slaves came from and were transported to the Americas. Okay, well, let's look at an old map. This is a 1730s Negroland map, and it details specifically where people would come from the European countries in order to get their goods or slaves. The slave coast is outlined in yellow. A specific section of it is called the King of Judah or Widow Slaves Coast. Okay? Yes, the same Judah from the Bible. And many are saying African Americans are descendants.
It is well documented that the biblical Israelites were a black-skinned people. And it is well documented that they married among themselves and remained black-skinned wherever they went all throughout history. It is well documented that many of them lived in the west coast of Africa. It is also well documented that some of these same Israelites from West Africa were transported in cargo slave ships to the Americas via what is famously known as the transatlantic slave trade. Many European Ashkenazi Jewish Gentiles are coming out admitting this fact because they cannot hide it anymore.
And I'd like to now bring up another interesting place that you're finding descendants of the Israelites, but may not necessarily be from the 10 tribes, but will also play a role. And it shouldn't be overlooked. It's a very serious scenario, is in Africa. Africa has perhaps hundreds of millions of people with this identity right now of being from the people of Israel. Does that mean they were from the 10 tribes? Likely not. We were taught by the historians and within our own traditions that when the Romans conquered Judea a few hundred years after that the tribes of Israel went into exile, perhaps millions of Judeans were sold into slavery, into Africa, into Rome, deep into Africa. And if you look now, you're seeing people who are most likely the descendants of those slaves who kept true. I'd like to bring up a few specific examples because they're going to be game changers. And where it gets interesting is, in America, there was a slave trade. And a lot of the slaves, a very high percentage of them, came from Western Nigerian ports. And in America today, you see a very large movement of African Americans who say that they're the real chosen people, that they're the children of Israel, they're the Judeans. You know, so what are they just trying to create an identity for themselves because they were slaves, or is there really something here? And the answer is most likely there is something there. And most likely maybe that they were the original Israelites, and maybe that the Jewish people today who are white Caucasian people came in a little bit later on. We know that some of the greatest sages of the transmission of the Torah were converts from Rome. You have a man named Onkelos who wrote a commentary on the Torah, unprecedented, that we still learn today. He was a convert. Some of the largest pillars on the transmission today were Roman converts. So here we are, we're Caucasian Jewish people, and now you have people in Africa saying that they're the real people of Israel. It can't be ruled out at all. We know they were sold into slavery. We know now that they're fulfilling prophecies by saying, we're coming back.
The truth is out in the open. The cat is out of the bag. The descendants of Negro slaves in the Americas are the 12 tribes of Israel mentioned in the Holy Bible.
In fact, there have been many books written on this subject. Ebo's Israel Exiles from Israel, Amazing Facts and Revelations is just one of the books. In this next video, we see Harry Rosenberg speaking with Remy Ilona.
Very clear and understandable that there is a connection with the Igbo tribes and the people of Israel. There's a history and it's real, and we're going to move forward doing something together. I also spoke about something which could be a little controversial, which is the Hebrew Israelite phenomenon in America. We have descendants of the transatlantic slave trade identifying with being of the children of Israel. Now, can you tell me, in this transatlantic slave trade, was there any Igbo blood?
31% of the African American population is believed to be of Igbo ancestry, because Igbo land suffered more from the slave trade than any other part of Africa. And the Igbos were dumped in places that are presently the United States of America, more than in other parts of the Americas. So definitely, a lot of the group identified as African Americans today have Igbo ancestry. The question now is for us to know who and who descended, and a few of them have gone ahead to do their DNA studies. And what we see is that they have Igbo roots. We have T.D. Jakes, we have Forrester Whitaker.
That's very fascinating. I mean, we know that Israel isn't, like we mentioned before, pure blood only. It doesn't have to be you are a direct descendant of the house of Israel to be part of the house of Israel, because the Torah is very clear that people can join the house of Israel. But if the 31% of the slave trade you're saying was made up of Igbo, now today, with all the marrying, everyone marrying each other, we could assume there's Igbo blood scattered throughout the whole African-American diaspora. Is that correct?
We can assume that because with the intermarriage, they were mixed together. It will be very, very difficult to find an African American that does not have Igbo blood today, because the group intermarried.
This is mind-blowing. Now, I'd like to go a little deeper. The African American Hebrew Israelite groups, they identify mainly with this movement. Not mainly, but they say they fulfill a lot of the curses in Deuteronomy in the Bible. That says when God's going to curse the children of Israel if they don't listen. They identify with being from the house of Israel because of those curses.
The curses of Deuteronomy are for the people of Israel. After they are rescued from Egypt, they go back to worshiping other gods. They don't listen to Yahweh, and they don't worship him in the way that they're supposed to. So God punishes his people. In Revelations, it says that they will finish being cursed when he returns.
What we're trying to suggest here maybe is that could be true, very well true. That's not the only reason that they are from the children of Israel. If you follow where they actually came from, there is a clear trace. I say there's no smoke without a fire. Look where the slave ships came from. Look where they came from. There's Hebrew Israelite culture. There's the people of Israel saying that they're right there.
This map shows the Israelite migration into Africa. Many went west, some did go east.
And Olaude Equiano, whom I'm sure some of them may have had access to, spoke about this and wrote about this as far back as the 17th century.
Once again, we have Olaude Equiano, who writes in his narrative his experience with the Igbos.
This guy was captured at the age of 9 as a slave. He made his way to England, educated himself, bought his freedom. Once he saw the Jews, he said, these are the Igbos. He almost said that these are the Igbos. He compared the traditions, compared the culture, even went as far, I'll be a little bit funny here, he said they wore beards like our ancestors wore their beards.
Okay, great. Yeah. They say it's a recent phenomenon that the people of Israel shave, but hundreds of years ago was not the case.
Here's a list of the 10 lost tribes of a total of 12 tribes of Israel. These 12 tribes originally split because of the heavy taxation and extraordinary burdens of laws they had under King Solomon. As you can see, the migration pattern of the Israelites, some did go to East Africa, down towards Madagascar. Let's see if we can find evidence of this migration today. The history of the Madagascar Islands is of a mystery and allure. according to Europeans. However, locals say that more than 80% of the islanders have Jewish blood from the 10 lost tribes. Many on the island still perform basic Jewish customs, including circumcision. In fact, one tourist recounts that the elders of the island told him, "You see these trees? These are cedar trees. These are the trees our ancestors cut down and sent to Jerusalem when Solomon was building the temple. According to the tradition, Madagascar is the biblical land of Ophir and provided wood for the temple." In 1 Kings chapters 10, 11 through 12, we find that Hiram brings King Solomon, son of David, gold from Ophir, and from there they brought great canoes of almug wood and precious stone. The king used the almug to make supports for the temple of the Lord and for the royal palace. As he says, it's called the Bais Hamikdash, or the first temple of Jerusalem. The temple which God gave the plans to David, and David had to give the plans to Solomon to build. The temple was of great wealth, and they had to search the land for all the cedar and equipment and materials in order to make the temple. Do you see those big pillars? Those, he says, came from Madagascar. So if you didn't know, here's a more accurate depiction of King Solomon. This is an ancient picture. His mother was Bathsheba, and she was a Canaanite woman. And remember the story with David, and he got with a woman. Solomon's lineage is important because it goes way back in explaining why he had bushy locks of black hair. And finally, family, we're going to go through our family name. Our family names have been passed down for many generations, just like it is with many African American families. And we're going to take the name Emmaus. I never knew what the word Emmaus meant. It's easy to look up many other names, but Emmaus, for some reason, was difficult to find. The name Emmaus, E-M-I-A-S, is a Latin derivative of a Jewish name. Isn't that funny? All these years. The name Emmaus is from the prophecy of Jeremias, a Latin derivative of Jeremiah. Jeremias or Emmaus is an Afro-Asiatic or Semitic name. Hence, Madagascar is in the more Asian part of the globe. It's a Hebrew name. It means Jeremiah or Jeremiah. Jeremias or Emmaus was one of the major prophets of the Hebrew Bible. He is recognized as a prophet in the New Testament, in Christian religion, Judaism, as well as Islamic religion. The name Jeremias also means Yahweh will exalt from the roots, or to exalt. In Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 15, "For lo, I will call all the families of the kingdoms of the north, saith the Lord, and they shall come, and they shall set every one his throne at entering of the gates of Jerusalem, and against all the walls that are round about, and against all the cities of Judah. And I will utter my judgments against them, touching all their wickedness, who have forsaken me, and have burnt incense unto other gods, and worshipped the works of their own hands. Thou therefore gird up thy loins, and arise and speak unto them all that I command thee. Be not dismayed at their faces, lest I confound thee before them. For behold, I have made thee this day a defense city, an iron pillar, and brazen walls against the whole land, against the kings of Judah, against the princes thereof, against the priests thereof, and against the people of the land. And they shall fight against thee they shall not prevail against thee, for I am with thee, saith the Lord, to deliver thee.
And in America today, you see a very large movement of African Americans who say that they're the real chosen people, that they're the children of Israel, they're the Judeans. So what are they just trying to create an identity for themselves because they were slaves, or is there really something here? And the answer is most likely there is something there. And most likely maybe that they were the original Israelites, and maybe that the Jewish people today who are white, Caucasian people came in a little bit later on.
So in conclusion, family, there's truth. We've proven this by lineage, oral tradition, DNA, and naming. And this goes for many African Americans who have roots from slavery or members in your family that you can trace back that were slaves. And don't forget to join us for next time, part 2, when we'll discuss why it is that this information is just coming out and what prophecy does this fulfill. Don't forget to subscribe.